Welcome to People Who Perform, the Real Estate Careers Podcast. Each episode will bring you conversations from business leaders and up-and-coming stars in the commercial real estate industry in Canada. Our guests will share their unique career journeys, passions, and advice on what it takes to be successful in this industry. This podcast is brought to you by Highview Partners, connecting people who perform in Canadian real estate.
I am your host, James Ashley, and today it is my pleasure to connect you with Jim Dimanis. Jim is Vice President of National Residential Operations at BentallGreenOak. For more than 20 years, he has been a student of the industry as he has climbed his way from a condo manager to a vice president. His passion for real estate has taken Jim across Canada, where he has held senior and executive roles in Ontario, British Columbia, Alberta, and the Yukon. On his travels, he has gained valuable insights and experience into operating from small to large commercial, institutional, and residential portfolios. Jim is also an advocate for the homeless, and he dedicates his time to educating others and helping to find solutions to combat this major social concern. A dynamic, compassionate, and thoughtful leader with a genuine desire to better the lives of the people he serves, it is my pleasure to introduce Jim Dimanis. Jim, a very warm welcome to the People Who Perform podcast. Thank you for being here with us today on this very sunny Sunday afternoon in the city, and a great way for us to wrap up the weekend with this conversation. So thank you for being with us.
It's really great to be here. I've been looking forward to this. And what a great day. This is a great way to end off the day, quite frankly. So nice to be here, James.
As you and I have spoken before, Jim, your career in real estate has taken you in a number of different directions, far and wide in terms of the locations, the asset classes, the organizations, and also the challenges that you've faced along the road getting to where you are today. So all that being said, my first question, which could take us in a number of different directions, tell us about the journey on the road and what have been the lessons that you've learned as you've maneuvered your way through real estate across Canada.
Real estate is such a vast field. There's so much to know, so much to learn. When I got into the business, I really got into it as a student of the business. And so I really set out to be the best real estate professional that I could be. And, when I graduated from George Brown, it was actually during a recession. And that was probably the first lesson I learned, and that there weren't any jobs out there, quite frankly. And the first job in the business for me was as an assistant superintendent in a condominium building in Scarborough. I wasn't thrilled about the job, but I wanted to get into the business. And I was offered a job with a great company. It was with Dell Property Management. And I'm glad I took it because, quite frankly, I learned so much right from, I don't even want to call it the bottom, but I learned so much being on the front lines as an assistant super, learning to clean, wash down garbage bins, deal with residents and their concerns. And so it was a great way to start. And from there, the executive at Dell took notice of the fact that I was willing to do that type of job, and they got me into a management training program, became a property manager within the condo world. That's where I sort of started off. I was a little older. I was, in my late 20s. I knew that I had a lot to learn. I decided that I wanted to get into the residential rental world. I actually went back to school for a brief time and took a marketing program because I thought, I wanted to get into commercial as well. So what types of skill sets do I require in order to break into the commercial market? My career went from Toronto to Edmonton, from Edmonton to Whitehorse to Vancouver to Calgary, and then back here. I basically worked in commercial, institutional government. I was an assistant deputy minister up in Whitehorse. What I did learn from my journey on the road is that it really is a journey and you need to take risks. Best thing you can do is to learn, to go out and to stretch and not be afraid. I suppose that's, I'm a bit of an iconoclast, and from that perspective, some people would probably say, probably better off to stay with one organization and work your way up. For myself, that wasn't me. And again, I was a real student of the game, and I wanted to learn as much as I could. So I took a bit of a different alternative route. You need a bit of an adventurer's heart, but it worked out.
Jim, you started in condo, and since then you've moved into managing commercial buildings, government institutional buildings, mixed-use portfolios, and now you're working within the residential space. Can you talk to us about some of the lessons that you've learned through managing residential properties?
I really ended up gaining more of a passion, if you will, for multifamily for various reasons. One is, and let me, taking you back to my college days, I wanted to make a difference in this industry in addition to learning as much as I could about the industry. Fairly certain we'll talk about this a little later, but housing has always been very near and dear to my heart. And so I always knew that at some point I would end up back into multifamily, even though, at the time I was managing commercial portfolios or government portfolios, et cetera. I knew from an investment perspective or a business perspective, if you will, that multi-res was really in its nascency insofar as an investment type of vehicle, meaning that, pension funds, when I first started off in the business, they weren't overly interested in multifamily apartments. In fact, I think, the majority of the apartments back then were owned by families or high net worth individuals. And so I knew early on that multifamily was going to be a growth industry, understanding that this particular asset type was eventually going to start taking off from a needs, right, perspective, supply and demand. We still don't have enough apartments, quite frankly, and housing, considering how many people are looking and what our vacancy rates are. The lesson learned for me along the way was that I realized that it was a business that was still in its nascency. There was an opportunity for me to get involved and potentially to further my career and move up if I specialized in multifamily. So that certainly played into it, along with the fact that there's also the social aspect, and that you're also building and growing a community. That's very different. Commercial doesn't offer that to you. And so I found that very appealing. I enjoyed going to the buildings. I enjoyed meeting the residents. I enjoyed going to community events and getting to know these tenants. Some of them became very, very good friends, and I still keep in touch with some of these people across the country, even until today. So there's a certain appeal there for me.
It sounds like a work environment that certainly promotes human connection and relationships. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. No question. If you want to be in the multifamily world, you really need to you need to love people. You're dealing and working with them in their homes. And there's an added sense of responsibility. The decisions that you make going to make an impact on somebody's home.
That brings me on to the challenges that residential faces. Let's look at this from two angles. Let's look at the challenges that face residential as an asset class, and then let's move into hiring for residential when you're building your team.
Well, the asset class itself, there's not enough of it. We need to build more apartment buildings, more multifamily across the country. There hasn't been a lot of multifamily development for quite a long time. And that's really been a product of rent control. So developers have been reluctant to build apartment buildings for the mere fact that government tells them what their rents can be and have an influence on rental increases and things of that nature. And we've suffered as a result as an asset class because we don't have enough product out there. You limit people's choice. And you've got buildings that are quite old and there hasn't been a lot of capital investment because the returns aren't necessarily there. But we've seen that change over time and with some legislative changes, certainly here in Ontario and Alberta doesn't have that issue, doesn't have rent control. We're seeing a lot more development, which is great for the business. It's great for the consumer. I mean, having choice is important. The other challenge that this asset type has is because there hasn't been a lot of development and a lot of competition, we really haven't grown as an industry as they have in the United States. And so, you look at amenities, for instance. A lot of the older stock in Toronto and Ontario really have a lack of good amenities. And so, residents, tenants suffer because of that. So you have a business that really hasn't been growing like it should be. And because there was little growth, little competition, things like customer service, that suffers as well. Again, when people have choice, I think that really ups the game of landlords and people that are in the industry to ensure that they're doing a great job, they're offering a great product, and everybody benefits But again, we're seeing that change. There's lots of multifamily development going on now, which is really exciting. The product that's being built is fantastic quality. It's condo quality or even beyond. The amenities space is it's hotel quality. So things are changing. They're going in the right direction. And pension funds are investing in multifamily. It's become a bit of a darling of the pension funds for various reasons. I won't go into them. And of course, you see a lot of REITs now that have come up specifically around multi-housing. The industry is just, it's getting better and it's maturing, which is fantastic. The other challenge that comes with all of this is because it's a relatively, we'll say, young profession, there aren't a lot of people that are in the industry. For whatever reason, managing apartments isn't a viable profession or wasn't presented as a viable profession. Certainly not here in Canada. I mean, the US, it's a bit of a different story. That's been a challenge in finding people that have the education and level of experience to take on these multi-million-dollar assets and manage them effectively. I think that's changing. There are a lot more people that are getting into the industry, that are transitioning, let's say, from hotels or even commercial, that are bringing that kind of experience to bear to the multifamily industry. So we're seeing the pendulum swing a little bit. There's more room, especially for post-secondary institutes, to offer bachelor's or even graduate level degrees in property management specific to the multifamily industry. Until that happens, until you really see it taking root within post-secondary institutions, I think we're always going to have a bit of a challenge. As a result, we're going to have to, as an industry, we're going to have to do more in training people. And so the company that I work for, BentallGreenOak, we are very much vested in providing really good training and development. And so I think a lot of the REITs and the other larger landlords are doing that because we know that we have to, quote unquote, grow our own.
I am seeing more and more that the REITs, the larger service providers and the pension funds are bringing in-house training, as are some of the smaller companies too. What's interesting about what you shared, and I've seen this from a recruiting perspective, is that there was a gap in the market for a good 30 years or so between when apartment buildings were built through the 70s into the 80s. And then there was the birth of the condo development. It's now that some companies are beginning to come on board in terms of building apartment buildings, and it is beginning to build some momentum there. From a hiring perspective, what I found recently when I was working on some rental residential hiring, it was a challenging hire. Majority of people that were coming forward for the roles were working on much more outdated properties that didn't have the amenities, that did not have the customer service. And so there was a gap. Obviously, to look is in the condo space because those buildings match in with the lay of the land with these new developed buildings. But the skill set and the experience of a condo manager varies greatly from the experience of a rental and apartment property manager. So it has caused some challenges out there when it comes to hiring. But I do have to agree with you that there is this growth that's happening now where I am seeing more entry-level talent. And it is important. And hopefully with time, the colleges and the schools and the universities will begin to get behind this because it is a fantastic industry. It's a fantastic asset class. And as you mentioned earlier, if you're really somebody who is committed to building relationships, then this is a great place that you could do that.
Just to add to your comment about the hiring for new developments, just the lease up process alone, a certain amount of time that you have to lease these suites up. Obviously, you want to maximize revenue on behalf of the owners. And it's quite specialized. It's very much a process. It's a process that commences far before the doors are open. And so there's so many different skill sets. There's so many different things that have to happen in order to be ready for that day one of renting the suites. So there's a lot of marketing that has to happen, understanding online marketing, understanding market demographics. And so it's very specialized and it's extremely challenging. And there's so much money on the line. And just, again, finding people that have that kind of experience, it's pretty rare. There's just not a lot of people in Canada that have that type of experience. And the lease up process is just incredibly important. So again, I'm hoping that schools and other companies will continue to push the training and we'll get a lot of much needed talent out there.
Jim, let's learn now about what drives you. Let's talk about your passion, what motivates you to to get up and get out of bed every day and do what you do. Where did the passion for real estate come from? And also, where did the passion for residential?
Real estate touches everything. It touches every single industry. I was somebody that enjoyed wearing different hats. I like accounting. I like finance. I like engineering. I love working with people. I love to write. I enjoy contracts. For me, real estate really gave me the opportunity to wear different hats. I think it's not boring by any means. And it also allowed me to touch different industries and meet different people. And as I said earlier, I really came into this business as a student of the business to learn as much as I can. So you can imagine an industry as vast as real estate. You can learn every single day for 20, 30 years and still not know it all. So that's, I think, what really turned me on was just, the vastness of it all and being able to learn so much in different industries. I found that to be very exciting from a professional perspective. About second year of attending George Brown College, and George Brown at the time was probably the only post-secondary institute that offered courses in property management. Got a call from my father. Hadn't heard from him in quite a while. He and my mom were going to be in the city in Toronto. And he said, why don't you come and join us for a coffee at a donut shop at Danforth and Pape. Jumped at the opportunity to see my folks, hadn't seen them in a while. Took the subway down, was walking out of Pape Station, walking south on Pape towards Danforth. And I walked and I see my dad's car parked down the street. And I look inside the car and I see pillows, a blanket, canned foods, bottled water, plastic forks, so forth. And I thought to myself, I think my parents are living in their car. Across the street, go into the donut shop, and there's mom and dad, and they look pretty disheveled. And I knew immediately that they were living out of their car. In fact, they had been homeless and were homeless. And they spent a lot of time in donut shops. They couch surfed. He shared with me how things happened. And quite frankly, they became homeless, in over a matter of just a few months. And so it really, struck me that homelessness can happen to anyone, and it can happen suddenly. And then you find yourself, you've got no house, no home. What do you do? And my parents were, older. So it was pretty tough. But at the same time, it also opened up my eyes to a problem, and it birthed within me a passion to find a solution, and a solution to homelessness. That's a pretty ambitious statement, but it changed me. It changed my life. And so I knew shortly after that time with my parents that somehow I was going to use the experience gained within the real estate industry to make a difference, to find solutions to homelessness. And that really became a driver for me as well. Considering that I was in this business to become a student of the business, you marry that up with wanting to find solutions to something as complex as homelessness, because there are so many variables and so many things that go into homelessness, from mental health issues to poverty to a lack of affordable housing. It fit well. I just thought, well, I'm going to spend the next 20, 30, 40 years trying to figure this out. As my career grows, hopefully I can make a difference and I can help people like my parents find homes, find a job, get some dignity back into their lives. That really was an impetus for me and has fueled me and still fuels me till today.
What an amazing story. And thank you very much for sharing that with us. And this extends beyond just passion. I think this became purpose for you. Whether we've had family members or we know people that have been homeless, to just dealing with housing in general. I'm sure people listening in got a lot from what you shared. So thank you for that. I'd like to build on that now by understanding what steps you have since taken to fulfill that passion and that purpose that you've just shared.
I used my experience to, sit on various boards, nonprofit housing board, used my experience on to raise money for capital campaigns to build housing. I just basically took my experience and offered it up where I could. I also offered it up just through talking to developers and sharing as a speaker at various conferences the need for affordable housing and explaining that, homelessness can happen to anyone.
Mm-hmm.
You could be sitting in an audience having a 6-figure salary and things are going great. And you wake up one day and, your assets are wiped out. You're looking for a place to live. So I used every vehicle I could to promote people getting involved in trying to find solutions, to motivate developers to think about building affordable housing. It also led me to work with Toronto Community Housing for a time. So I had the good fortune to work at TCH and was a manager of program services. Part of my responsibilities were to bring private sector practices into a social housing setting in order to improve operations. And that was a fantastic experience. And it gave me an opportunity to give back as a professional. But I also learned a lot and recognized, again, as I said earlier, just the different facets and what causes homelessness and just how complex the problem is, the situation is, and that we need to do more to address it. I've always been an advocate. I will continue to be an advocate, and it'll always be a part of who I am.
I commend you for your advocacy, Jim, and your heartwarming message on how family hardship led you to making a difference, and I'm sure in the lives of many. I delved a little deeper into the stats, knowing we would be speaking today, and to put this major social concern into perspective, you can fill Scotiabank Arena twice with the volume of people that are experiencing homelessness on any given night across Canada. And you can add to that number by filling the Rogers Centre with those experiencing hidden homelessness, whether it's couch surfing or sleeping in a car, as was the case with your parents. So the numbers really speak. This is a big problem, and it is one that continues. So this brings us to the non-for-profit and the charitable organizations that you support. Can you share with us a little more about who they are and how you go about helping them make a difference?
I'm almost reluctant to talk about specific charities because, again, there are so many that are making great strides at a community level. I wouldn't mind mentioning at least a couple, and one is a nonprofit, which I already talked about, and that's Toronto Community Housing. If you're going to be working in housing and dealing with homelessness, then you're going to be dealing with mental health issues. You're going to be dealing with poverty issues. All of these things go hand in hand, unfortunately. Ultimately, there are people that are looking for an opportunity and a hand up in order to move on. They're not necessarily looking for a handout. Organizations like TCH do a great job. The Salvation Army is another one that's very near and dear to my heart. They meet people where they are on the streets. And I've had opportunities to do some work with the Salvation Army and have been in meetings with people that live on the street. They're looking to get off the streets. But again, there's no housing. I learned through the Salvation Army and through other organizations, housing first, so incredibly important. If you don't have housing, how are you going to get a job? You don't have an address, not quite sure how you're going to fill out a job application. So the Salvation Army, in addition to meeting people on the street, they recognize the importance of some of these other programmatic things that you need in order to help people dealing with addiction issues, mental health issues, feeding people, helping them with employment, those kinds of things. And then the other one I'd like to touch on is Habitat for Humanity. I love the model. God bless people like Jimmy Carter that started Habitat and has just set into motion a worldwide phenomenon in terms of getting affordable housing to people and giving people ownership. And allowing them to put in their sweat equity in order to have that ownership, because that is also so important, being able to own something and lifting people out of poverty that way.
Are you committed to being a force for good? At Highview, we care about people and work to change lives for the better. In 2019, we partnered with Help Heal Humanity, an internationally registered charity who provides the world's most at-risk population with access to programming and infrastructure. Through our efforts, we've sponsored more than 30 children in Haiti to receive education, food, community, and love. We all have the responsibility to give back and change lives for the better. If you would like to learn more about how you can support this incredible charity, please visit helphealhumanity.org.
Jim, thanks for sharing about your passion for and your contribution to homelessness. I'm going to move this now into the framework of work. And you are Vice President of National Operations, BentallGreenOak. I imagine that finding work-life balance can be challenging at times, but also you appreciate the importance of work-life balance. So what steps do you take to keep your body and your mind in good working order?
Great question. Confession time. Early on in my career, the way I did that was get together with a bunch of buddies after work and go out and have a few drinks. But as I got older, I realized that that wasn't working very well.
You realize that you couldn't keep up.
Well, it was,
or they couldn't keep up.
Well, exactly. It was tough being a regular at 8 bars, but I did it for a while. It ended up actually causing more stress. It wasn't a good fit when you consider the type of career and the type of work that I do. All kidding aside, I guess for me, I really try to break it up into 3 areas, and that's mind, body, and spirit. And I make a conscious effort to spend time working on those areas within my life. And I have to make a conscious effort to do it. And so I think that's important. In order to achieve balance, you really need to think about it. You need to plan for it and dedicate yourself to it. Otherwise, you will burn out. On the body side, I've been involved in martial arts since I was 13 years old. And so for me, martial arts has been an outlet from a physical fitness perspective. On the mind side, it's just learning and taking courses and learning about things outside of my work. For instance, right now I'm taking a university course in philosophy. I think it's important that you read or learn about things completely outside of your field. There's a lot of growth that happens there, and it's good for you. It's just good for your mind. You're not thinking about day to day. You're thinking about other things. So the spirit side really for me is my faith. Life is tough, and obviously, we're going through COVID right now. Honestly, I don't know how somebody can get through what life can throw at you without having faith in something greater than yourself. That's my perspective. It's a perspective shared by a lot of people. My faith, my belief has been instrumental in getting me through some very tough times in my life. It has been there when I've asked the tough questions like why? Why is this happening? Why are people homeless? Why do people suffer? These huge questions that all of us have. And if I didn't have my faith, not sure that I'd be able to handle things well. And it is a huge part of who I am and how I keep balance and how I it's my North Star, quite frankly. It also motivates me, and it also plays a part of what I've been talking about relative to my passion and wanting to make a difference. I think at the end of the day, all of us are bestowed with various gifts, and it's important that we use those gifts in order to improve other people's lives. It's not just about us, it's about making life better for those around us and for those that are less fortunate. And so that's very important to me.
As you mentioned, you need to keep working at balance. Life is constantly evolving, and we face new challenges often. Whether they're viewed as positive or negative, they're unavoidable at times. And it's important to have practices to help keep us grounded, motivated, and being the best version of ourselves. I'm glad you touched upon a few aspects because it's important to consider there are different forms of energy, physical, the emotional, mental, and spiritual, strengthening them. And by doing so, and it's been well documented, it can help to alleviate stress, anxiety, and the pressures that we feel in our everyday lives. And rightfully said, faith can help to answer those big questions and improve the lives of others. This brings me to my next question. When you're looking back over your career one day, what would you like to be remembered for, and what would your legacy be?
It's about impacting people's lives in a positive way. And so, in my career at work, it's developing people, seeing their potential, seeing where, who they can become and helping them get there, giving them the resources, the motivation, the opportunities to grow and to fulfill their dreams. Looking back, I would love that to be my legacy, to know that along the way, I helped a handful of people achieve their dreams, certainly within their career. And if I've had an opportunity to influence them to get involved in causes greater than themselves, then man, that's just icing on the cake. It's about the team. It's about the people that I work with and making them better. I would want to be known as somebody that helped some of those people do that.
Jim, it's time to wrap up our People Who Perform podcast. Thank you so much for being with us today. It's been fantastic listening to your journey and getting to know you better and what drives you and your contribution to homelessness and letting our listeners understand more about the residential space inside of the industry. Which now brings us to the last question of this podcast. What would be your top 3 pieces of advice for somebody that's either looking to start out or step into the real estate industry?
Number 1, take risks. As I said earlier, I started off with the notion that I was going to be a student of the business. I used that mentality to go out and work in as many different markets as I could. And so have had the opportunity to work in all of the major markets and across the country. And there's some risk involved there. We get comfortable pretty quickly. But I would, again, number 1, take risks, stretch, go after jobs that you may not think you're qualified for them. But guess what? If it's something that you want to do, try. Why not? Because guess what? You might very well get the job. And that job might take you up to Whitehorse in the Yukon. Take risks, stretch, become a student of the business. That all that's kind of one thing in my mind. And don't get caught up in sort of moving up in an organization. Again, and seek to learn. And I think that if you do that, you will move up. The second piece of advice is develop others, develop your team, develop people around you, because that in and of itself will propel you within your career. The better you make the people around you, the better you become. And quite frankly, the higher you go in industry. Number 3 is mentors. Seek out mentors early. I think it's important that we make mistakes. I think it's important that we sort of say, this is what I want to achieve. But man, it is so important that you find some mentors along the way that will help you avoid some major pitfalls. And the most important thing that you can ask a mentor to do is to keep you accountable. Share with a mentor what your goals are and let that mentor know that they have permission to hold you accountable to those goals. And if you do that, I just think you'll get to where you want to go a lot sooner, having avoided a lot of big pitfalls, and you'll be happier for it.
Thank you for listening to People Who Perform, the Real Estate Careers podcast brought to you by Highview Partners, a talent search and recruitment firm focused exclusively on Canadian real estate. If your real estate team is looking to find the best next hire, or if you're ready to make the best next move in your career, then reach out to Highview Partners today. Follow us on LinkedIn and visit us at highviewpartners.ca.